put an end to these migrant riots. Order will be restored, the president writing. The illegals will be expelled and Los Angeles will be set free. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So obviously some provocation here from the president in several facets as we see, here we go. Those demonstrators are making their way down the ramp and onto the 101 freeway. This is, I think, a concern that we had seen a little earlier. The freeway had been shut down by law enforcement, and it is now being shut down by the other side. Demonstrators are on the surface of the southbound 101 freeway and blocking traffic.
Riot season is upon us, and it came early this year. Isn't it amazing how we had all through the Biden administration, 21, 22, 23, 24, almost no rioting. None that was notable, that's for sure. 2020, widespread, nationwide, full-on ablaze. 2025, they're back. Isn't that odd? Isn't that strange? What a weird coincidence, isn't it? Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. This is Clint Russell. For those that aren't familiar with me or my backstory, I am a California native. Former, I should say. Born and raised, though. 35 plus years in California. Absolutely loved it until it was utterly destroyed by Gavin Newsom. So this story is personal to me. I am not going to pretend to be unbiased. I am extraordinarily biased about the circumstances that have led to this, the situation that exists today, and what ought to be done about it. I am going to lose a lot of supporters over what I have to say in the next 20 minutes or whatever this episode ends up being. I am radicalized on this issue. And I'm going to give you the backstory. I'm going to tell you why. You don't have to agree with me. And I hope that for once we could actually maybe disagree and still be friends at the end of it. But if not, that's fine too. Because I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you what I saw with my own eyes, and I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. And I'm going to tell you what I think we ought to be doing moving forward. And you can decide to agree or disagree. That's fine. It's America, after all. Before I give you my story, let's see some of the chaos that is ensuing. This is all effective as of last night to give you an idea of what's happening. So first up, you can see that we've got some, I think that's LAPD. I'm not sure, but they are pinned down underneath the overpass. Again, I think that's the 110. It's not looking pretty. Last night, Donald Trump issued an order to send in the National Guard. And then there was additional conversations about whether or not they were going to send in Marines from Camp Pendleton. I lived in Carlsbad, so I know this area well. It's about a 2-hour drive away from Camp Pendleton to Los Angeles. So if he does, in fact, decide to deploy the Marines, they will be there fast. Almost gives you a deja vu of Portland back in 2020, doesn't it? The autonomous zone. Once again, you have anti-ICE protesters that are setting up barricades on the streets and hunkering down, preparing for a fight of some magnitude. It's amazing to witness, and it's not at all surprising, but it is disappointing. There's so many years of mismanagement from Karen Bass as the mayor of LA, Gavin Newsom as the governor. There isn't a catastrophe that hasn't happened over the past few years that they haven't found some weird roundabout way to blame on Donald Trump, even when he was the president of the United States, fires in the Palisades and things like that. Every single failing of their management has been laid at the feet of Donald Trump somehow. And let me tell you, as someone who lived there, it is not a consequence of Donald Trump. It is not a consequence of Donald Trump's rhetoric or his behavior or anything like that. Now, you can argue this one is because he's in fact the one that's ordering these ICE raids to go after illegal immigrants. Allegedly, Tom Homan says they're going after the criminals, like the violent ones. I don't know if that's accurate or if they're doing widespread mass deportation at this junction, but regardless, it's still a consequence of the policies of the governor of California, because all of these sanctuary cities throughout California have created an environment in which illegal immigration has skyrocketed for years and years. And then Joe Biden left the border open for 4 years. And guess what? A lot of people came in. So now, because of the way the apportionment system works when it comes to congressional representation, even if you're not a citizen and even if you're not allowed to vote, if you are there in the state, you are counted for congressional seat apportionment, which means that if you allow for millions of illegals to come into the state of California or Texas or whatever border state they go into, that means that you get more congressional seats. And oftentimes that's, or in fact, mathematically, it has to subtract from some other states. because you're still going to only have a cap of 435 in the House. So that's how it works. And this has been the game plan for the longest time. This is the Democrats' game plan to essentially monopolize the system of government that we live under. This is ultimately what started to shift my mentality when it came to immigration and the border system. This is not about humanitarianism. If you think for a second that Gavin Newsom cares about Juanita, you're out of your fucking mind. This guy, he could not care less. Doesn't care even slightly about Jose or whatever. This is purely a political power play, a maneuver, a circumvention of the system in order to add to their power and to monopolize power by which they could essentially abuse the people that are from America. That's what they've been doing for a very long time. Now, I'm going to give you more backdrop as to why I changed my opinion on this issue. We'll get to that in a second. Let's check out some more footage.
To CNN's Kyung Wah, who has been standing by all day. Kyung, a lot has happened since we've been talking to you. Where are you now? What is the status where you are?
There are multiple protests now, or at least we should call them incursions between the people who've been demonstrating here, people who've joined in, and law enforcement. We are near where all of this began. And what you're seeing here is a mix of predominantly federal agents, Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Patrol, as well as the National Guard that brought out some of these protesters. But you can see they've created quite some space between them and these protesters. That violence that you were referring to, Jess, you can see that there's a car burning in the background. And while they've made a semicircle here on the street, you can see that the Waymo over there has been vandalized. And we understand that some cars over there may also be Waymos that have been set on fire. So this is a part of the night that law enforcement really worries about, because when I look at some of these protesters, they are not resembling the people who were here when all of this began earlier this morning in Los Angeles. This crowd is different. And so now you have a problem for law enforcement trying to contain these people, whoever they may be.
Isn't it odd how the news journo doesn't want to tell you, well, the people are different? The protesters from this morning and the ones that are there tonight, they seem a little bit how are they different? Could you elucidate for us? News person whose job it is to report what's going on the ground so that the people could actually understand what's happening? But she doesn't give us any details. Isn't that funny? Isn't that amazing? What's the implication? The implication is that these are much more dangerous protesters, perhaps ones that are not so much interested in keeping deportations from happening, but rather, I don't know, let's take a look at this. Just your standard Soviet flag wearing spectator as cops are pinned down underneath an overpass. Who doesn't wear a mask and adorn themselves with a Soviet flag? Oh my goodness. Yeah. So whether or not these people are paid agitators, I can't say definitively, obviously. I don't know for sure. I'd be surprised if some of them aren't. There has been reports that Antifa has put out the siren call to get their people activated and out on the streets. So I expect this to get really out of hand overnight and potentially go crazy over this next week. I hope not, but I'll give you my prescription as to how to remedy it. And let me tell you, libertarians aren't going to like it. And in case you were wondering if that journal was wrong about the Waymo cars being on fire, here you go. So yes, our technocratic dystopia is having a bit of a setback. The self-driving Waymo cars, which cost over $200,000 a piece, are set ablaze. So what's happening is that people are, you have to assume, people are ordering Waymos to come pick them up, and then they're lighting them on fire. Quite an interesting way of protesting. Let's hear what Gavin Newsom has to say about this kerfuffle.
Get your hands off these poor people. They're just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives, paying their taxes, been here 10 years. The fear, the horror. The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
This guy is like a daytime soap opera actor that somehow became like the highest level of hope of the Democratic Party to reclaim the White House. It's so transparent what's happening here. I hope we are all on the same page, but I'll give you my opinion in case you're wondering. He's running for president in 2028. I know. What a shocker, right? But the performative nature of his protest, arrest me, Tom Homan. I'm standing in between these poor people that I didn't give a shit about ever, that I locked in their houses for years as a consequence of a pathogen that wasn't even transferable through the air. That actually vitamin D was one of the best remedies, that if you actually were in the sun, it was actually going to keep you alive. And I said, stay in your fucking house. And by the way, did I leave the liquor stores open? Yes, I did. Did I close down the gyms? Also, yes. Yeah, I care. I'm standing in between you, Donald Trump, and Tom Homan, and these poor landscapers. It's just such fucking bullshit. If anyone buys this guy's shtick, you are so fucking low IQ, you should not be allowed to vote. And don't get it twisted, it ain't just limited to LA. Here is just outside the ICE headquarters in San Francisco. As I said earlier, according to Andy No, Antifa International has issued a call to action to hit the streets. This is going to get crazy. And I'm going to do my best to implore libertarians to think this through on a multitude of levels. And I don't expect you guys to agree with me, so just calm down, okay? But do you want to side with Antifa and the communists on this? Do you think that they may have motivations that aren't the same as you? Is there a chance that they're motivated by something else, given that the vast majority of them are overt communists? I hope you're thinking this through deeply. I really mean that. Once you understand, particularly the NGO network, so let me give the whole backdrop as to how I changed my mind on the immigration issue. First off, I was raised in California. I watched as my state changed dramatically and degraded as a consequence of that. Now, I didn't correlate that with immigration. I didn't think of it that way at all. Honestly, I thought of it primarily as a consequence of taxes and regulation. And I still believe that played a huge role, obviously. However, I then started to recognize, based off of congressional apportionment, that there was actually an incentive to allow for this to continue and to grow exponentially. And then I realized that there was a trend amongst Democratic states to have sanctuary cities by which they could get more congressional representation. Then I dug a little bit deeper. Then I realized that there was actually plans through the United Nations back in the mid-2000s where they talked about how they were going to essentially provide reparations to the third world by allowing for illegal immigration into the first world. And by first world, what they really mean was the West. And if you've looked at Europe lately, you already see what that looks like. It has not been great. Now, there are a lot of conflating factors here. This is not a simple story. And I think that's the biggest problem with trying to analyze this in a simplistic fashion, in a purely principled answer. People are free to travel where they want. That's a libertarian 101 answer. There's a lot of conflating factors. So I want you to just consider all of this and then decide for yourself. Then you add on top of the United Nations, the World Economic Forum's plans. They talk about replacement migration, where as depopulation starts to happen because there isn't enough reproduction in certain countries, it can be supplemented by immigration to offset the loss of revenue from the lack of reproduction of the domestic population. They argue, because of the nature of the social safety net, not just welfare programs, but Social Security, all of the entire entitlement basket, you have to have, because they're all Ponzi schemes, you have to have more people paying in than are receiving. If the baby boomer population doesn't reproduce, and if their offspring doesn't reproduce to a level that's as much or higher, then the Ponzi scheme goes bust now, doesn't it? And believe it or not, that was the more benign explanation, that they just wanted to maintain the house of cards that is our social safety net. And if that was the only justification, I guess it wouldn't be that bad. But that is not the only justification. What they realized very rapidly is that those that are immigrating from the third world in particular, we're not talking about people that are immigrating from Canada into America or from France or the UK into America, but people that are migrating from Latin America, the poorer areas, or from Africa or from the Middle East. They come across and they're destitute. They're extremely poor. Therefore, they need help right away. Who are the people that need help going to vote for? Historically, based off the domestic population, they're going to vote for the Democrats because those are the people that are offering the most handouts. The Republicans, at least in terms of rhetoric, are offering not that, even though they oftentimes give them that too. So that was the thought process. Now, the end game is to get as many people in as possible that aren't American and then offer them citizenship by which they are then dutifully supposed to support and vote for Democrats for the rest of their life because they were allowed in under Democrat policy and they were offered the most handouts by the Democrats. So why wouldn't they? Then they were offered citizenship by the Democrats. So, of course, they're going to be dutiful foot soldiers for the Democratic regime. That's the thought process. But it gets way darker than that. And this is what I think libertarians ought to be most upset about. This is where it gets super sinister. The NGO networks. Once I realized that the United Nations had these plans, I then thought, is this actually happening? Is it actually being funded? The answer is yes. Through the United Nations and through the NGO networks, tens and tens of billions of dollars, billions with a B, that's how much money, your tax dollars, are being used to assist in the illegal immigration into your country, not the legal immigration. So you are being robbed as a libertarian, that should upset you, to fund people to come into your country, to then outnumber you and to vote against your interests and to ultimately erode your liberty for the rest of your existence, as well as undermine the fiscal solvency of your nation. That is the game plan. Now, if you haven't heard of the Cloward-Piven strategy, this is that. You create a paradigm by which the system is overwhelmed. That's what they've been doing for decades. When did they start calling Donald Trump a fascist? Last I checked, it was day one. It was immediately, before he was even in power. And why did they do that? If you look at the circumstances that they created, it basically forces any Republican that comes into power, if he intends to remedy it, to use state power to do so. If he does that, then they get to say, told you, fascist. So this is the tails you lose, heads I win scenario. They're trying to paint him into a corner, and more than that, paint all of us, the Americans, the domestic population, into a corner too.
We saw the first night was bad, but we've seen subsequent to that is getting increasingly worse and more violent. Tonight we had individuals out there shooting commercial-grade fireworks at our officers. That can kill you. And we have adapted our tactics to be able to have a chance to be able to take these people into custody and to be able to hold them accountable. We are overwhelmed as far as the number of people out there engaged in this type of activity and the type of things that they're doing. They'll take a backpack, and the backpack will have a cinder block in it. They have a hammer, and they'll break up the cinder block and use that, pass it around to throw at officers, to throw at cars, and throw at other people. We've seen people with hammers, and you've broadcasted, breaking the bollards behind the federal building and taking the rocks, if you will, or pieces of concrete and throwing them at officers. We've had liquid of who knows what description thrown at officers. There's no limit to what they're doing to our officers. And again, as I mentioned in my statement, I can't thank our folks enough and our partner agency police officials for going out there and taking care of the community.
So what has happened in California since 2020? Thanks to the defund the police movements, a lot of the police forces have been defunded and they are undermanned. Now, something that you should understand about California, obviously it's the most populated state. What I think a lot of people don't know is that it also, obviously, this is logical, it has the most illegal immigrants. The old estimates was that there's somewhere around 3 million illegal immigrants that live there. I think it'd be crazy to think that there's not at least 10% of the 40 million, which would put it at 4 million. I think it's far higher than that. By some estimates, there's 4 million illegal immigrants just in LA County alone. It's a very large state, and while LA County is huge, there's a lot more than that. A lot of people think there's more than 10 million there. I don't know. Some people say 20. I'm not going to guess at the amount. The point that I'm trying to get to is that we're talking about an astronomical amount of people. Astronomical. Now, as I said, I don't know if Donald Trump intends to deport all of them. I doubt it. I don't even think it's possible. But even if you say that the 10 million estimate is right, and then you just take 1% of that, if 1% of the 10 million is in fact criminal, like violent elements, that would mean you have 100,000 people that you have to try and root out of a state of 40 million and then deport all of those people. Well, the domestic population, many of which are also illegal immigrants, but perhaps not the violent type, are out on the streets protesting you en masse. How do you do that? The answer is you're not gonna, okay? It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen with ICE agents. It's not gonna happen with local PD. You're gonna have to bring in the fucking military. Now, I am not prepared to call for that because I think once you bring in the military onto domestic soil, we're in very dark territory. And just to be clear, despite the fact that I don't support it, there are a ton of Republican voters, maybe the majority, I'm not sure, but it's a lot of Trump supporters, Trump voters, MAGA, that want to see that. And there's a real chance that it happens as you're watching this. Like, it's close. If it gets really violent over the next day or two, I would not be surprised at all if it goes from 400 Marines to thousands of military troops on the ground in California. And once you're at that point, especially when you have a governor that's going against it, especially once you have the mayor of LA, which is going against it, I'm sure the mayor of San Francisco will go against it. It's a real conflict that has a chance to boil over into a serious crisis. I don't know if that's where we're headed, but there's a distinct possibility that we are. While I think that may very well be a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which is a U.S. federal law that restricts the use of federal military personnel for domestic law enforcement. But here's the caveat: unless specifically authorized by the Constitution or Congress, which means there is a chance that, in fact, because the Constitution does give border control to the feds, that means that perhaps they do have the right to use the military on domestic soil. So I think that there's a real argument that the Supreme Court would hold that up, in which case we could see major military action on domestic soil in California. And as Elon said, this is not okay. Look, I am not the type to lean into hard nationalism, to uphold the flag. I remember when I was in high school, I thought it was such an absurdity that I had to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I thought, because I was a libertarian from even back then, and I know that's crazy, I was weird. But anyways, I refused. And I think I got detention or something for it. But I just didn't like it. I've always been very critical of groupthink and any sort of fealty towards the state. And I still feel that way to a large extent. But I'll tell you this, I don't like seeing people stand on top of burnout cars waving a Mexican flag in my country. Yeah, I said it. My country. It is. It's mine. Okay? I'm going to say it. I don't care. I was born here. I have a better claim to it than anybody else in the rest of the world. I'm standing on that. And when I see someone with a foreign flag standing on top of burnt out cars in my country, it does not feel like assimilation to me. It feels like conquest. And I don't know how anybody looks at that and doesn't feel similarly. Today's episode of Liberty Lockdown with Clint Russell is brought to you by our friends over at Crowd Health. If you've had to deal with health insurance, you already know it sucks. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent on the phone trying to get stuff covered, and it's just a nightmare. Health insurance processes are confusing and can leave you feeling taken advantage of, and that's exactly why Crowd Health was created. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code LOCKDOWN at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN. Folks like that are not here to get along. They're not here to become an American. They are here to replace the domestic population with their own set of cultural beliefs and values, whatever they may be.
And this is not just a good gesture. This is something we need to make real. We need to bring down this empire once and for all. All right. Burn it down! Burn it down! Burn it down! Make it great like 92! Make it great like 92! Patriots afraid of you! Patriots afraid of you!
Now, some of you aren't from California and some of you aren't old like me, so you won't be familiar with this, but that chant that they're doing, I think it's Make It Green like 92. 92 was the LA riots. That's when the worst riots in my lifetime, I think probably in California's history. They were insane after the Rodney King beating by LAPD. The streets were ablaze for weeks. I don't know. I was a kid, but it felt like forever. And they are chanting the same thing, and they're saying, make it like 1992, and they have their fists up. I don't know. It looks a lot like either Black Panthers / communists to me. I'm leaning towards communists on this one. Not sure. Doesn't really change the fact that they are lighting the flag of my country on fire, spitting on it, and they have a banner up that says resist on it, which once again goes into the kind of Antifa / Marxist rhetoric. I'll make it very blunt. These people don't reflect my values. Now, I don't think it's necessarily good to honor all laws. Unjust laws, you should violate. There are laws that are just, and therefore you should not violate them, like murder, for instance. These people are overtly and boldly violating the laws of this country and some of the laws that I think matter, like who is a citizen, who is allowed to be here. And this is not a minor incursion. We're talking tens and tens of millions. By some estimates, 30 million plus. By some estimates, it's 50 million or higher of illegal immigrants throughout the entire country, not just California. Now, will all of them vote for the Democrats? No. According to a Pew Research study from 2013, 54% of immigrants said that they identify as a Democrat. So you're thinking, oh, that means 47% identify as Republicans. Wrong. 13% of first-generation immigrants in this country, and these are legal immigrants, identify as Republican. That means that a huge percentage of those that come here legally will ultimately vote Democrat. These are first generation now. As the generations go on, certainly they'll acclimate more to the American way, and many of them will then embrace gun rights and privacy rights and things of that nature, and they may lean more libertarian or Republican. But the first generation, the mass majority, will vote Democrat dutifully. The illegal immigrants, do you think that they're going to be higher or lower than that? My guess is even higher. And no matter how you feel about the Pledge of Allegiance, if you're the type of person that lights the American flag on fire while you're here illegally, spits on it, and then chants, do you think that they're the type that really love the Constitution? Because it strikes me that, well, yes, I fully support anybody who wants to protest, and I absolutely support burning the flag if you want to. I wouldn't do it myself, and I would probably recommend against it. But if you're here illegally and you are burning the American flag in a country that you are not here legally, that tells me that you are here to take over. And based off the voting trends, I know exactly how you will. And unfortunately, the Democrat Party has become such an existential threat to my liberty that if you intend to vote in such a huge percentage in favor of the Democrats, then I have to perceive that as a maneuver by which you have full spectrum dominance when it comes to electoral victories. And that is the goal. Don't get it twisted. So what's the answer? I'll tell you. After the Summer of Love, the 2020 riots, which extended for months, I think you have to crack down hard. And I say this with major hesitancy, because I don't think I've ever supported federal law enforcement on any matter. So I'm very hesitant with what I'm saying. Let me be very clear. But I think it's necessary. I think that if you allow this to go on, if you basically say, we can't deport anybody, not even the violent ones, because you're going to have, there's no way to discern. You have all of these protests that are stopping ICE agents from doing their job. According to Tom Homan, they're going after the violent illegal immigrants. They're not even going after the line workers and shit like that. So if you can't deport the violent ones either, you are basically accepting the Cloward-Piven strategy that they have put you into. And I refuse to do that. And I know that all of the worst people on earth intend to use this paradigm by which I am relegated into slavery. Maybe not physical or literal slavery, but slavery nonetheless. Now, I've probably lost my entire libertarian audience during this rant. I hope not, but if I have, so be it. Now, I'm going to try and gain you back. If you've hung on this long, I'm going to give you some red meat. This is what we ought to be really concerned about, okay? According to John Weissman, These hexagons aren't always MQ-9s, but in this case, yes, there are 2 MQ-9 Reapers over LA today. Just ridiculous. Now, for those not familiar with the MQ-9 Reaper, those were deployed in the global war on terror. It is a versatile, medium altitude, long endurance, armed, remotely piloted aircraft primarily used for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions, as well as strike missions against dynamic targets. So why does that matter? Other than the obvious that the same devices, these same fucking flying killing machines that flew over weddings throughout the Middle East and just wiped out people willy-nilly, oftentimes, are now flying over American soil. Not fucking cool. But it gets worse. Someone I consider a bit of a friend, not fully, but we know each other. She says, this is Laura Loomer this morning, time to deploy Palantir tech to Los Angeles to deal with the illegals. You'd love to see it. You're lying if you say you wouldn't. Hi, Laura. Clint Russell here. Love to see it. No, I would not. Now, why did I run that back-to-back with the Reaper drone? For those that don't know, the primary thing that Palantir does, which, by the way, I'm working on a deep dive episode on Palantir, which should be out in about 2 days. You guys are going to want to check that one out for sure. But Palantir's technology is capable of very high-level facial recognition and database technology to cross-overlay these risk assessments. Just check out the episode in a couple of days. I'll give you the full rundown. But the fact that there's MQ-9 Reaper drones over Los Angeles and you have Ms. Loomer posting about unleashing Palantir's technology on that, that means that once you have the surveillance of these protests, you're able to put it into the database for Palantir, by which they can use social media, everything on the internet, AI. It's very high level, and ultimately create a total domestic police state, surveillance state. And I'm not talking just for illegal immigrants. I'm not talking just for deportations. I'm talking about in perpetuity. I'm talking about forever. Because guess what? Once the government realizes what this technology is capable of, which, by the way, they already have, they've already realized it when it comes to Gaza, because they're involved too. They know. It will be utilized against us, and it will not just be utilized for deportations. It will be utilized forevermore. So the primary thing I want you guys to think of in your mind is this. Gavin Newsom walking a Trojan horse through the gates, and inside it sits Palantir. Particularly if things get really out of hand, they are absolutely going to be deploying that. And the Trump administration, primarily because of J.D. Vance and his relationship with Peter Thiel, which I will get into deep detail on in a few days, the daisy chain of contacts in this administration that leads directly to Palantir is concerning, to put it mildly. The fact that you have Laura Loomer tweeting that out this morning gives me serious concern.
There's something they're trying to manufacture consent for. Remember, when they justified the passing of the Patriot Act over 20 years ago, they told us we needed all this extra power to go after the bad guys, to get rid of the terrorists. But almost immediately, the government started to use that extra power they were given to spy on ordinary Americans, right? How can you be so sure that you will not be deemed an enemy of the state? One.
So as RFK Jr. said, any power that government takes from the people, it will never return voluntarily. Every power that government takes, it will ultimately be abused to the maximum extent possible. Nobody ever complied their way out of totalitarianism. The only thing we can do is resist. Whatever power you give the government, it will ultimately be used against you. And that must always be in the back of your mind. And I hope, more than anything, whatever you conclude when it comes to the immigration issue or the border, that you think deeply before you advocate for Palantir technology to be unleashed on the domestic population. Because if there's one thing I've learned about giving the government additional authorities, it will always end up in the hands of a president you don't trust. So if you like Donald Trump, imagine President AOC wielding the Palantir database over the American people. And if that doesn't convince you, well, then you're probably not able to be reached. Please do share it around, hit the like button, subscribe. And if you think I'm wrong about any of this, please do leave a comment down below. I do read them, and I occasionally reply, depending on if you're nice to me. But most importantly, have a nice day. Now, if you want to support my work, I would really appreciate it if you did. You could subscribe on my locals, libertylockdown.locals.com, or on my X at Liberty Lockpod, and I'll follow you back. You can get cozy. Our friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of your life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the best bed sheets ever. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike is offering the best deal on his Giza Dreams bed sheets, any size and any color, just $49.98. I own them and they rock. That's right. You can even get queens, kings, split kings, and cow kings, any size and any color, just $49.98. Just go to mypillow.com and use promo code LOCKDOWN. Get you some cozy.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?